Well, welcome to this evening's council meeting. At this point in time, I'm calling the meeting to order. If we could please pay attention to Councilman Duncan for the invocation to be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. And if you are either at home or you are at the council chambers, please rise if you are able.
Thank you. This evening we have, my mic on? Okay, good job. This evening we have with us Imam Omar Hazim, who is of the Islamic Center of Topeka and Islamic advisor to the Kansas Department of Corrections. He has served in those positions since 1990. He has helped establish mosques and Islamic centers in the Kansas City area and is a founder of the Islamic Center of Topeka. He's a member of the Midland Islamic Council and Islamic Society of North America and is on the advisory board for Topeka Police Chief Bill Cochran. He was the first Muslim to give the invocation to the Kansas House of Representatives and Senate. He was married for 47 years to Aliyah Hazim before her passing in 2010, with whom he has 8 children. All are Topeka West graduates, and on a personal note, I myself am a Topeka West graduate who crossed paths with some of his children through the years. His wife was very nice to me back in the day on a few occasions, and some things you just don't forget. He is now married to Deidre Gordon Hazim, who is a writer, author, and teacher at the Islamic Center of Topeka. He received a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Midland Islamic Council and was honored with the 2015 Peace Award from the Topeka Center for Peace and Justice. Thank you for being here. The mic is yours.
With God's name, the merciful benefactor, the merciful redeemer, creator of and sustainer of the heavens and the earth and everything contained therein, highly exalted and glorified are you. Our Lord, we come before you today as we attend this city council meeting. We offer humble prayer and ask you to have mercy on this gathering and grant us peace and harmony as we strive to work together for greater understandings of one another. Our Lord, help people of faith and all good human beings stand up against oppression and injustice wherever it occurs in the world. O Creator of mankind, please keep us far, far away from the dangerous satanic mentality of exceptionalism, racial superiority, and arrogance. Guide us and our leaders of this city council and help us to understand each other without being biased and prejudiced. Help us to communicate in dialogue with one another for the best benefits of our communities. Creator of all mankind, as we worship you in our diverse ways and traditions, help us not to forget or neglect our duties and responsibilities in this life. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you for your grace as everybody at home is sitting back down and readjusting their computer screens so that we could continue with the meeting. At this point in time, we move on to the roll call.
Mayor De La Isla.
Here.
Council members Hiller.
Here.
Valdivia Acala.
Here.
Ortiz. Emerson.
Here.
Padilla.
Here.
Nager. Nager.
Wait, sorry.
I'm not hearing anything. I don't know about the rest of it.
Yeah, I'm not. We lost, I don't know if you guys noticed, but we lost the council chambers.
Yeah, I'm a secret.
Hear us?
Let's give them a minute.
Oh, we can hear you.
Okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, Councilmember Nager.
Here.
Dobler.
Here.
Duncan.
Here.
And Lesser.
Here.
We have 9 present.
9 being present, we proceed with the meeting. At this point in time, we move on to the appointments, if the clerk could read.
A is a board appointment recommending the reappointment of Jeff Roman to the Board of Plumbing Examiners for a term ending December 31, 2021. And B is a board appointment recommending the reappointment of Neil Carlson to the Board of Plumbing Examiners for a term ending December 31, 2021.
The body has heard the appointments. Are there comments, questions? And if there's none, what is the pleasure of the body? Councilwoman Nager.
Move for approval.
Okay, we have a motion by Councilwoman Nager, a second by Councilman Dobler. I am so sorry that I am unable to see the chambers, so if anybody had comments or questions, please speak up. Seeing no comments or questions, at this point in time, we proceed by voting.
Council members Hiller,
Yes.
Valdivia Akala,
Yes.
Emerson,
Yes.
Padilla,
Yes.
Nager,
Yes.
Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
and Lesser.
Yes.
We have 8 yes.
8 having voted yes, these individuals are appointed to the board. Are any of them, the 2 individuals present on the chambers?
No, doesn't look like it.
Okay. Regardless, thank you so much for your service to our community. We appreciate you. At this point in time, we move on to item 3, the consent agenda, if the clerk would read.
A are minutes of the special meeting of July 11, 2020, and the regular meeting of July 14, 2020, and there are no applications.
Body, what is the pleasure?
Move approval.
We have approval by Councilman Dobler. Do we have a second? Second by Councilwoman Nager. Comments or questions with regard to the consent agenda? Hearing none, at this point in time, we proceed with the voting.
Mayor De La Isla,
Yes.
council members Hiller,
Yes.
Valdivia Akala,
Yes.
Emerson,
Yes.
Padilla. Councilmember.
Yes.
Nager,
Yes.
Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
and Lesser.
Yes.
We have 9 yes.
9 having voted yes, the consent agenda passes. We move on to item number 4, which is the action items. We have the first item, if the clerk would read.
A is an ordinance introduced by City Manager Brent Trout removing the real property located at 2020 Southeast 6th Street from the Dynamic Core Redevelopment District.
City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. When we approved the TIF district for the downtown area and the dynamic core, we knew that there was a possibility that properties that were located in that district might want to be removed from the district. Tonight, we have our first property that relates to that request, and that is a request to remove the AT&T building from the TIF district.
You need your mic on.
So,
Uh-oh.
my mic's on.
She can't hear.
I hear you perfectly, sir.
Okay.
Don't hear that. I just don't know.
Yeah.
I just can't see anybody.
Is there not, is the camera not on?
We just see the insignia of the city.
Okay.
There we go.
Somehow I turned the video off. I'm sorry about that.
Oh, and there's Lester too.
Lesser and Ortiz.
Should I continue? Okay.
Yes, please continue, City Manager.
All right.
Pardon the interruption.
That's all right. No, that's fine. So in the future, even though tonight we have this item on as an action item, I wanted to do that because this is our first request, and so that we would all understand what it would be. In the future, we talked about these items being as consent agenda items as they come up. But so tonight, though, it is an action item, and request your consideration of that.
We have 2 individuals before we proceed any further with this item that have signed up for public comment. If they would like to speak before we begin our discussion. The first one is Seth Wagoner.
I don't have anything at this time.
He said he doesn't have anything at this time, Mayor.
Thank you. Yes, I was able to hear him. And the second person is Lucky DeFreeze.
We're just happy to respond to questions if they have any.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for that. At this point in time, we have heard the item. Does the body have questions? And I did see Mr. Lesser.
Motion to approve.
We have a motion for approval. We have a second by the deputy mayor. At this point in time, do we have additional comments or questions for the individuals that are here to present for us should we need some help? Seeing none, at this point in time, we proceed by voting.
Mayor De La Isla,
Yes.
Council Members Hiller,
Yes.
Valdivia Akala,
Yes.
Ortiz,
Yes.
Emerson,
Yes.
Padilla,
Yes.
Nager,
Yes.
Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
and Lesser.
Yes.
We have 10 yes.
Then having voted yes, the motion passes. We now move on to item B, if the clerk would read.
B is an ordinance introduced by City Manager Brent Trout authorizing and providing for the issuance of $14,110,000 of aggregate principal amount of general obligation refunding and improvement bonds, Series 2020A of the City of Topeka, Kansas, providing for the levy and collection of an annual tax for the purpose of paying the principal of and interest on said bonds as they become due, authorizing certain other documents and actions in connection therewith, and making certain covenants with respect thereto.
City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Today, we conducted a sale of general obligation bonds and TIB notes to assist in the payment of capital improvement projects we have coming up for the year 2021. Jessica Lemondola will now present the results and introduce some other individuals that will speak to us tonight. Jessica?
Hi, good evening, everyone. So today the city was in the bond market and we sold 2 long-term deals and then 1 short-term, I believe. And what all of these projects come from are from the capital projects that you have already approved in either the 20 CIP or in prior CIPs. So today we have Jeff White from Columbia Capital Management with us, our advisor, along with Kevin Cowan, our bond attorneys from Gilmore and Bell. And so just short and sweet is that the sale today went very well. The city bonds again were well received. It speaks to the strong credit quality that S&P highlighted last week in their report. And so at this time, I'd like to hand it over to Jeff to go over the particulars of the sale.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, Jeff White with Columbia. It's been our privilege to serve as the city's independent financial advisor for about 20 years. So as Jessica noted, 3 transactions in the market today, 2 short-term, 1-year-ish transactions with respect to notes, 1 taxable, 1 tax-exempt. The winner of the $10.6 million tax-exempt note was Morgan Stanley with true interest cost, which is an effective borrowing rate of 0.34%. To give you a quick comparison, the federal government can borrow for a year at about 0.15%. So very, very strong rates. Interestingly, we sold taxable temp notes. Those were purchased by Piper Sandler, just shy of $14 million in notes. The interest rate on that was 0.42%. That gives you a sense of how compressed taxable and tax-exempt rates are in today's market. Pretty staggering. So that's certainly terrific news, but really more important because of the life of the general obligation bonds. Sold $14.1 million of general obligation bonds. Those were purchased by the Baker Group, which is a small boutique broker-dealer in California, and at a winning bid of just about 1.3%, which again is pretty stunning when you think about the fact that these bonds are long-term bonds. The city enjoys the highest possible rating from S&P on its notes. It enjoys the 3rd highest rating from S&P on its bonds. We had 3 bids on each of the notes, 5 bids on the bonds. That's pretty consistent with what we've seen in the past. And considering that our market basically failed to function for about a month in March and April, this is a pretty stunningly great result. So with that, Madam Mayor, happy to try and answer any questions.
You know, Jeff, at this point in time, I'm sure that the prevailing thought on any council member is how many more are we going to refinance at these rates so that our citizens are not having to carry the burden of financing, which is amazing. And it makes it a very interesting formula for us as a governing body, because we know that we have projects that we have to set forth, and we don't want to overborrow, because obviously we want to be fiscally responsible. That's extremely important for us. But at the same time, it's almost like any projects that we could expedite potentially with the cost of borrowing right now would almost just make sense for the future of our community, because pretty much we're borrowing for cash. And I hope that our community is seeing this, that in the midst of this pandemic and of the fiscal crisis that many communities are facing, because of the hard work of our finance team and this governing body, we have been able to retain a very wonderful rating with regards to our credit. But then in addition to that, that we are being proactive and taking advantage of this opportunity in our finances to refinance, which again is savings for our constituents. So this is great news. I'm sorry, I'm just excited and geeking out over the numbers. It makes you wonder if you can refinance your house for that amount.
And I failed to mention one very important thing. We refinanced about $7.5 million in bonds today and produced about $870,000 in savings in 2020 dollars. The city's in the market every year at this time, and every year we have bonds that will come up with an opportunity to refinance. We take full advantage of that, and our payments on those bonds are going to be about 12% lower than they would had we not refinanced them. So pretty terrific.
Wow. There's kind of a small project that we're talking about with Polk Quincy. Maybe this is the rate that we need to look for. So, all right, any other comments or questions? Okay, seeing no comments or questions, what is the pleasure of the body? This is an action item.
Move approval.
Deputy Mayor moves approval and Councilman Padilla seconds. Additional comments or question with regard to this wonderful refinancing? Seeing none, we proceed by voting.
Mayor De La Isla,
Yes.
Council Members Hiller,
Yes.
Valdivia Acala,
Yes.
Ortiz,
Yes.
Emerson,
Yes.
Padilla,
Yes.
Nager,
Yes.
Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
and Lesser.
Yes.
We have 10 yes.
And having voted yes, the motion passes. We move on to item C. If the clerk would read.
C is a resolution introduced by City Manager Brent Trout prescribing the form and details of and authorizing and directing the sale and delivery of $14,110,000 of aggregate principal amount of general obligation, refunding and improvement bond series 2020A of the City of Topeka, Kansas, previously authorized by the ordinance of the issuer, making certain covenants and agreements to provide for the payment and security thereof, and authorizing certain other documents and actions connected therewith.
City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. This is just the second item that needs to be approved as it goes to our bonds and note sale.
Questions from the body, comments, or the pleasure of the body? Councilman Dobler makes a motion for approval. Councilwoman Nager seconds. Comments or questions? Seeing none, we proceed by voting.
Mayor De La Isla,
Yes.
Council Members Hiller,
Yes.
Valdivia Acala,
Yes.
Ortiz,
Yes.
Emerson,
Yes.
Padilla,
Yes.
Nager,
Yes.
Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
and Lesser.
Yes.
We have 10 yes.
And having voted yes, the motion passes. We now move on to item B, if the clerk would read.
D is a resolution introduced by City Manager Brent Trout authorizing and directing the issuance and sale and delivery of $10,555,000 in the aggregate principal amount of general temporary renewal and improvement notes series 2020A and $13,870,000 in the aggregate principal amount of taxable general obligation temporary renewal notes series 2020B of the City of Topeka, Kansas, providing for the levy and collection of an annual tax, if necessary, for the purpose of paying the principal of and interest on said notes as they become due, making certain covenants and agreements to provide for the payment and security thereof, and authorizing certain other documents and actions connected therewith.
City Manager.
Mayor, this is our third step tonight related to our temporary notes.
Questions from the body, comments from Mr. White? What is the pleasure of the governing body? Councilwoman Nager makes the motion for approval. Do we have a second? Councilman Padilla seconds. Comments or questions with regards to temporary notes? Councilman Dobler.
I believe, do we require our bond counsel and financial advisor to stay around through the end of this meeting if, assuming all these pass? No? Okay.
I think Kevin Cowan should stay for the entire meeting.
Yeah.
All right, so we have a motion, we have a second, and we have smart aleck comments. If there is no other comments or questions, we proceed by voting.
Mayor De La Isla?
Yes.
Council members Hiller?
Yes.
Valdivia Aquila?
Yes.
Ortiz?
Yes.
Emerson?
Yes.
Padilla?
Yes.
Nager?
Yes.
Dobler?
Yes.
Duncan?
Yes.
And Lesser.
Yes.
We have 10 yes.
10 having voted yes, the motion passes. We now move on to item E of the agenda, if the clerk agrees. Thank you so much for all your help, both Kevin and Jeff. We appreciate you.
Bye.
E is amending governing body rule 3.1 concerning regular governing body meetings.
City Manager.
Mayor, this is a item that was addressed by the Policy and Finance Committee back in the beginning of the year. And so this is this is the 90-day time frame for a report back to the governing body. And I know that the committee hasn't had a chance to meet, but I would, any comments that Councilman Lesser would have.
Councilman Lesser, Chair Lesser.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. City Manager is correct. We have not had the opportunity to meet. That being the case, we have had the opportunity, all of us, to deal with the budget situation that we're dealing with, deal with the COVID situation we're dealing with. And it's my position as chair of this that we can either push for a vote tonight, or I have no intention of bringing this back up in any of the future meetings. My position is I don't see, with our budget position as we are and what we're asking our staff to do, et cetera, the expenditure that will come forth in the next item of $12,000. I don't see any sense in that. With going out to the community and what we would have to do to make that safe. I think we're going to end up incurring even additional costs as well if it's not safe. And I think having a solid, predictable place where we are going to have, when we can get back to even somewhat more normal circumstances, makes more sense. So I don't think it makes any sense to put more burden on our staff for any type of planning. And I'm in the position to either pull this or vote on it, of which I will not support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Lesser. I think that we could all agree that this stems from a heart of inclusion for our community. However, the times have changed. So was that a motion, Councilman Lesser, that you made, or would you like somebody else to make a motion with regards to this item?
I'm happy to make a motion on the item for the sake of it has come in front of the council. There was There was obviously, at least at the point in time when it was, the thought that we wanted to bring this in front of the council, see what we thought. So I guess I will not make it as a motion, but that's what I would probably request if my colleagues want to bring it to vote on this. I would say that this would be the time to do it because I don't have any intention of bringing it back up in my committee.
Okay, so what is the pleasure of the body? Are there questions or comments? Councilwoman Ortiz.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll make a motion to vote it down.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Mayor, I guess if I could ask, I guess kind of a point of order. So if it's a motion to vote it down, that means a yes is a no, right? Okay, I would second that then.
Okay, so the request in this motion, voting for a yes means that we strike it from our items of action. So this is no longer going to be an issue. Lisa, City Attorney, is this an adequate motion? Are we okay? Are we voting for a negative or?
Mayor, it seems kind of odd. I would say maybe a motion just to withdraw the matter.
Yeah, yes. So Councilwoman Ortiz, would you accept that friendly amendment to make the motion to withdraw the item?
No, I'll make a motion to approve it then, and then we can vote no. Because I would like to get it off the table. That's what I'm trying to do. So
Okay,
I'll make a motion. I'll make a motion to approve it.
Okay, wonderful.
And I second that.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm sorry that I had to ask the question because I know that we don't do motions for the negative. So, so at this point in time, we have the item in front of us. Is there any additional questions or comments on this item? Councilwoman Nager.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I really hope that we get to a point where we can talk about something like this in the future, especially for the inclusivity and the equity that this could have brought. But yeah, I think that with the health of the community at stake, now isn't the time. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll make
Okay.
Councilwoman Hiller.
Oh, yes, Councilwoman Hiller.
Thank you, Mayor. Since we're going to have a little bit of discussion, I always felt that it was an awkward and kind of forced thing to consider moving the council meetings themselves around. But I do hope, since we're talking about it, that, you know, what I have found is that even in recent years, especially if there is an issue where we decide we want public hearings and we really want to see public participation, whether it's been a committee or the council as a committee of the whole, we're still able to do that, to do public hearings out in the community. And so as the days move forward, even voting this down today doesn't prohibit us from heading out in the community, at least for public hearings if we want to. And I do encourage that, as with Councilwoman Nager. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, additional comments or questions on this item before we proceed to voting? And again, just a reminder for those of you at home, this was a motion to start moving these meetings, the city council meetings, out into the community. The concern that the body has expressed at this point in time is the fact that with COVID-19 and it not being safe for us to have interactions out in the public as much, this is something that maybe we would reconsider later, so don't be surprised if you see everybody voting no for this. All right, seeing none, we proceed by voting.
Mayor De La Isla?
No.
Council members Hiller?
No.
Valdivia Acala?
No.
Ortiz?
No.
Emerson?
No.
Padilla?
No.
Nager?
No.
Dobler?
No.
Duncan?
Yes, just to make it exciting.
And Lesser?
And I'm
No.
sincere.
We have 9 yes, Mr. Duncan voting no. I mean, excuse me, 9 no, Mr. Duncan voting yes. You got me on that one.
All right, the motion fails. We now move on to item F, if the clerk would read.
F is an ordinance introduced by City Manager Brent Chat, amending City of Topeka Code Section 2.15020 concerning meetings of the governing body.
Hit the wrong key. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a sister ordinance change to the actions that would have been, it was considered in the last one. This would have also established a rotation system for the locations of the meeting. So it was a companion to the one that we just considered.
What is the pleasure of the body, Councilwoman Ortiz?
I'll vote no for the sister.
Well, we have to make a motion first to approve it.
I'll make a motion to vote no for the sister.
Councilwoman Ortiz makes a motion to approve. Councilwoman Nager seconds. At this point in time, a vote no would mean that we are not following through with this ordinance that would have allowed us to make modifications of location. Councilman Lesser.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There again, as chair of the committee, this is the big point that I think the COVID issues speak for itself, but I also understand Spencer's position as well as Hannah as another member. This is not entirely, in my opinion, due to unwillingness or not wanting to go out into the community in certain circumstances. However, we do have a stable environment for the meetings, predictable environment for the meetings. And, you know, while it's $12,000, that's the main press for me in these budget situations of asking our staff to cut employees, cut budgets. This is a want, not a need. And that's the primary, I too, as Hannah would say, want to say, you know, engaging the community. I think we all want to do that in the right circumstances. So just speaking now for myself, my position on this was I can't with a good conscience spend $12,000 during these times, as well as the safety, but to move forward on that. So that's all I had as chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Lesser. At this point in time, Councilman Duncan.
I will clarify my sole yes vote, which will probably be a sole yes vote on the next one. And I take no issue with the chair or his position, and we had this discussion multiple times, and I understand where he's coming from. We had talked at one point about sort of passing it with the caveat that it wouldn't be looked at again for X amount, but I think because we weren't able to meet as a committee, we just weren't able to get there. So it's not that I'm in opposition per se to the thought, but I still think it's a good idea, and I'd like to see us do it. So my yes vote is just my continued support of seeing that happen in the future. So I just want to put that out there for everyone, so they wonder what the heck I'm doing over here.
Thank you. Additional comments? Okay, seeing none. A vote yes ensures that we have the ability to move the meetings. A vote no means that we continue having the meetings by protocol in the location where we're having them currently. We proceed by voting.
Mayor De La Isla?
No.
Council members Hiller?
No.
Valdivia Acala?
No.
Ortiz?
No.
Emerson?
No.
Padilla?
No.
Nager?
No.
Dobler?
No.
Duncan?
Yes.
And Lesser.
No.
We have 9 no, Mr. Duncan voting yes.
9 having voted no, the motion fails. Now we move on to item G in the agenda, if the clerk would read.
E is approval to authorize the establishment of a special committee to review and make recommendations to the governing body relating to public infrastructure projects.
City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. We reviewed and discussed this item last week, and so through that discussion, so the support that was received, we seek governing body approval at this time.
What is the pleasure of the body? Do we have questions or comments for City Manager? Seeing no questions, yes, Councilman Dobler.
I would move approval.
We have a motion for approval. We have a second by Councilwoman Nager. Additional comments or questions? Seeing none, we proceed. Oh, Councilman Padilla.
Just very quickly, and I hope this is not the wrong place to ask this. Is there a mechanism in place that will help us understand who will be on this committee, or is there special requirements for people to be a part of this committee?
I can answer that. Per the rules, the deputy mayor establishes the assignments of committees, so this would be an item that the deputy mayor would make a determination on as to who would serve on that committee.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Lesser.
The only question I had that I hadn't been able to locate as well is will this committee will be only of council members, or will there be other outside individuals? I was not able to find that.
City Manager.
Yes, Councilman Lesser, it will comprised of council members as the voting members. Obviously, anyone that the committee would like to have present at the meeting to answer questions or give information, you can let us know that, and we can make accommodations as staff to have those individuals present.
Is it a three-person, that's as similar to the other committees we have? Is it a three-person committee?
Lisa's looking, but I believe it was 3. Let's see. Not sure that the language, I'd have to check the ordinance here. We're looking, hold on a second. See if it specifically states it.
I think it says. Does our charter say all 3 though, on the committees?
No.
Good point.
Mayor, I don't think that it's noted here in the explanation. Maybe that was done on purpose, just to make it kind of open-ended. And the standing committees are 3-member committees, but if you recall, the committee that was formed back when we did pedestrian safety and I can't remember camping. The super committee, yes, it was much larger. So I would say 3 to 4 is probably standard.
Yeah, I would think that 3 would make the most sense.
Councilman Lesser, do you feel like your answer has
Yes, thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
additional comments or questions? Seeing none, we proceed by voting.
Mayor De La Isla,
Yes.
Councilmembers Hiller,
Yes.
Valdivia Aquila,
Yes.
Ortiz,
Yes.
Emerson,
Yes.
Padilla,
Yes.
Nager,
Yes.
Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
and Lesser.
Yes.
We have 10 yes.
And having voted yes, the motion passes. We now enter into item H, if the clerk would read.
H is an ordinance introduced by Councilmember Spencer Duncan regarding an ordinance concerning execution of search warrants.
City Manager or Councilman Duncan?
Yes, Mayor, I have nothing further to add. I'll pass the speaking vote to the.
So obviously last week, we delayed this till this week, so there were some concerns from the union, which I expressed at that time. We met, we talked, we made some amendable changes, primarily focused on some language within it. At the end of the day, the 2 primary things that I wanted to accomplish with this are still being accomplished. The first is it bans no-knock warrants by the city of Topeka, and the second is it still includes a mechanism that if for some reason one is used, now that it's in law, it can be investigated and even sent up the chain to prosecution if absolutely necessary. So as far as I'm concerned, even with the changes, mission accomplished. I'm very appreciative of the union meeting with us, and we had great conversations. I think not only helped us through this, but moving forward. And so with that, I can either move it or somebody can. Discussion.
Before entering discussion, I would like to invite our speakers so that we could hear from the public before we start talking as a council. The first person signed up to speak is Matt Blassingame.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, City Council members. My name is Matt Blassingame, and I serve as the TPD Chief Steward for the Fraternal Order of Police Lodge Number 3. We appreciate the City Council, and particularly Councilman Duncan, and allowing additional time to review the proposed ordinance. I want to thank you for allowing the FOP to be part of the review process, and city staff for meeting with the FOP during the last week on our concerns. So, thank you.
Thank you so much. We have another person signed up to speak. That person is Nicole Purse.
Do not see her, Mayor.
Okay, the next person is Oshara Hayes.
Good evening. Before I speak, for clarification, does your comment mean that the no bans were approved and it's okay? Just for clarification before I speak, if it's okay, then.
We haven't voted on it.
Oh, okay, then I will read then. Okay, first of all, I'm standing for the people, and I wanted to say that I want to read an article because an article about no-knock warrants. And I want to read this article because everything starts on a macro level, and we're talking locally, so that's on a micro level, and that's the importance. And I just want to read two demands. One, we demand that if the no-knock ban violates the FOBP contract, that you renegotiate the contract, and we demand a ban on no-knock warrants. And this article I want to read is by Tyler Broker, who it's in a law review. Hope y'all don't mind me reading it. A perpetual tragedy is continually being played, excuse me, out in the United States. A long-reported deadly tragedy in the form of no-knock police raids. For anyone who might not be aware, no-knock raids are a practice of forcible entry by police without prior notification into a place of residence. As everyone should expect, having a bunch of armed government agents regularly bursting into residences unannounced leads to a lot of deaths. The most recent reiteration of this perpetual tragedy resulted in the death of Breonna Taylor, who was shot 8 times by government officers conducting a no-knock raid. The death of Taylor has all the outrageous elements of other past tragedies. Neighbors reported the officers never identified themselves before bursting in and opening fire, a claim further supported by the fact the couple inside called the police out of the belief they were victims of home invasion. The police accounts are riddled with inconsistencies. The warrant, which was obtained by reason for which the no-knock raid was authorized, on its face appears to have violated the Fourth Amendment. What is about the no-knock warrant that made it such a blatant violation? In justifying their request for a no-knock raid, specifically, the officers only cited the nature of how these drug traffickers operate. The problem is the Supreme Court has specifically rejected this type of categorical justification for no-knock warrant. Put simply, well, I lost my place. I don't know what I did on here. But anyway, I just wanted to read about the no-knock warrant. Mm-hmm.
Don't feel like you have to rush. If you need a little bit more time, just ask us for time once the clock expires, okay?
Okay. Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that. I'm going to get back to where I was because my finger hit it. Okay. Sorry about that. Thank you for understanding. Okay. Okay, I'll get back. Kind of skipped over some things. But and I'll skip down. Lest anyone think this type of flagrant violation where a violent no-knock raid
No, you'll go. You have a minute.
I do, okay, is not only requested by police but signed off on by a judge despite little to no evidence of guilt. It's just an isolated incident. And then he quotes different people in here. And then every no-knock affidavit he reviewed included boilerplate language about exigent circumstances, word for word, The detectives included the same verbiage about how drug dealers typically have access to guns and are inherently dangerous, and how the surprise tactics of no-knock dynamic entry will make it safer for the officer serving the warrant and everyone inside. And again, in 95 of the 103 no-knock warrants granted, the boilerplate language was all that the police relied upon to request and receive a no-knock warrant. And it goes on. Yet, even though no-knock warrants commonly include violations of the Fourth...
O'Shara, would you like an extension of your time?
Yes, please.
How many minutes would you like?
Oh, just 2 more minutes.
2 more minutes?
2 minutes.
We have a motion by the Deputy Mayor. Do we have a second? Councilwoman Nager seconds. Can we proceed with the voting to extend Ms. Hayes to 2 minutes more?
Mayor De La Isla?
Yes.
Council members Hiller?
Yes.
Valdivia Alcala?
Yes.
Ortiz?
Yes.
Emerson?
Yes.
Padilla?
Yes.
Nager?
Yes.
Dobler?
Yes.
Duncan?
Yes.
And Lesser?
Yes.
We have 10 yes.
10 having voted yes, Ms. Hayes, you have 2 more minutes.
Okay, thank you. Yet, even though no-knock warrants commonly include violations of the Fourth Amendment, that fact does not matter much in the end, and thus does not deter the police from executing them or judges from signing off. Again, another quote, the reason narcotics officers can get away with it goes back to a Supreme Court case, Hudson versus Michigan, and in that case, the court ruled 5-4 that violations of the of the knock and announce rule would not result in the suppression of the evidence seized in the ensuing raid. So it can go on and on, but I hope you get just what I'm trying to say and how that supports no knock. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. O'Shara. I was told that there were 2 additional ladies that came in, so if Nicole first is here to speak.
Hello, I guess I speak this way. My name is Nicole Purse, and I'm a business owner, a mother, and a community advocate. And I'm speaking on behalf of my fears in regards to how this opens up a can of worms to our homes, allowing them to have the authority to implement harm, which they consider is security and safety tactics, but giving them the authorization to just come into our homes endangers their lives as well as ours, because that's an invasion that someone who could be just sleeping wake up and not know what's going on. In a open carry community, anything can happen. And that also bothers me as a mother, because I have young black men as my children. And that is the biggest stereotype that goes on today. My son is a 4.3 GPA student. He's an honorable person, but he is friends with men and kids who are growing up who are stereotyped in other communities that they live in as the bad kids or someone who can cause harm. And by association, even in school, he's had to do in-school suspension with being just a friends and on the basketball team. So if somebody by chance says, oh, we suspect something and we want to do a no search warrant, that opens my home. I have other young ones who, we don't live into this life that everyone else does. I'm a homeschool parent already before COVID. So our lifestyle has already been different, and I would like to keep it that way. I don't like that my kids are able to go on the line on the news and read all of these issues that they're facing and feel intimidated and scared that one day in the middle of the sleep, the police will knock their door down and do as they see on the TV. And I really think that it really needs to be a ban. We demand it. I've written the email and I've sent what I think needs to be done. I don't think at this time I need to go over step by step the initial demands, because it's already written. And I stand true to what I've said and sound that those demands need to be met. We do not need to allow access to the police, which through experience in just a normal traffic stop of my headlight being out, I personally, with my 13-year-old son, experienced the police telling me that they will break my window, unlock my door, yank me out the car, throw me on the ground, and take me to jail, and my son go to a juvenile detention center until someone can help him. And the only thing was bothering them was that my headlight was out. Mind you, I, as a citizen who could not get it fixed at the time because of the position I am as a mother, I had my fog lights on, which illuminated both sides of my vehicles so that it shows, according to Kansas law, I am a moving vehicle with lights on both sides. I asked for an extension.
You have 1 minute.
Well, okay. And so as I'm illuminating my car legally, but sort of bending the legal legalities because I have one headlight out, but both sides are lit, I get pulled over and harassed, intimidated and threatened. That was a whole lesson in itself to go back home and teach to my son, you're still supposed to trust the police. And so you're putting us in a position to authorize them to come in, do as they choose to do, and we have no say. And we should have say in our own home. That is our sanctuary. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. The next person signed up to speak is Nubian Phillips.
Mayor?
Yes, Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala.
I have questions of Ms. Nicole. Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Ms. Nicole, sorry. Ms. Nicole, can you tell me, that incident that you're explaining, I tried to look up your email right now. Did that happen here in Topeka?
Yes, it did happen here in Topeka on 21st Street.
About how long ago?
Around October of last year.
Did you file anything with the independent police auditor?
Well, I did not file anything with the independent police auditor. One, I speak with my family about how we should handle things, and being that we have no family here and we don't feel protected to go against the grain, my son did ask me to just go with the flow of things. I did receive a citation about that headlight and that incident, and I refused to pay a fine, brought it to court, and tried to adjust the matter in front of the judge. And because they wrote my name incorrectly on the ticket, instead of hearing what I had to say, they threw the ticket out. Said to me, well, you don't have any fines and nothing's the problem, like as if I should be content. Contentment is a state of happiness, and I live to be peaceful, not just happy.
Okay, and I have one other question, again, going over the email that you sent. So this ordinance right now that we're going to be voting on tonight, which is banning the no-knock, what are your feelings? You believe that there should be no entry by law enforcement, period, or help me understand if you are for or not for this.
I am not for it. I think it should be no entry, period. Even on a federal jurisdiction, I think that we already have seen cases go to it happens and then we'll see what is made of it. I don't think that we need to wait for an example to be made. I think we should be the prevention of it. And I only mention what I experienced to show that the police officers use their authority in any situation that they can in an aggressive way versus an adverse way to help and support and protect.
And may I ask one more question?
Sure.
How has your family healed from this encounter that you're referring to?
Oh, me personally, I haven't healed too much from it. And my son, he's lost a lot of friends through the things that's going on in Topeka. And he's tried to bridge on, like, do outreach and still try to network, but every time he comes home, he still feels like it's a no-win, like we're not getting anywhere with moving forward in life and having a protection and unity of things going on. He still sees himself being victimized and stereotyped when he goes places, and I did even in Walmart yesterday.
And you have, how old are your children?
I have a 20-year-old, an 18, 14, 8, and 5.
Well, thank you, Ms. Nicole.
Thank you.
The next person signed up to speak is Nubian Phillips.
Hello, my name is Nubian Phillips, and I wanted to say no to the no-knock warrant, more because so what the other two people said, as well as personal experience. Hearing what happened with Breonna Taylor is one reason, and then also as a kid, I was always raised to if someone came into your house unannounced, you're supposed to protect yourself, and if it's supposed to be allowed to no-knock, you just bust the door down, and as a police officer, you don't know whether to protect yourself or to stop and listen to the police officers, which could cause a lot of confusion for younger kids as well as adults. And seeing what happened with her and her husband, he shot and then got arrested for assaulting police, even though he was only protecting him and his wife. I feel it just leaves a whole lot of confusion and to the families and the police officers if they were able to just bust down the doors and come in. And that's all.
Thank you so much for your comments. Thank you for being here with us tonight. Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala?
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Phillips, so then you are against this as well. There shouldn't be, you don't think that there should be any type of entry
Yes.
by police or federal law enforcement
Yes.
or anything for issues of safety?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, all right, thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, now at this point in time, we have heard all the individuals signed up to speak on this comment. And the person, I'm not Chair Duncan because this is not a committee, but Councilman Duncan, you already made your opening remarks. Any comments or questions with regards to this item as we proceed in discussion? Councilman Valdivia Alcala.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilman Duncan, I just want to say I think that this is a wonderful first effort, and I know how much you take to heart reforms that need to be made, and especially you were saying that, you know, we're not going to have certain police chiefs forever, so this will be, you know, codified. I do have one question. What is the definition of exigent? I just don't get that word. I was going to look it up, but.
There is a definition. I don't know that I brought it. I mean, it's,
I
don't know if Lisa has it on her either.
Yeah, I was just wondering what constitutes exigent circumstances.
Councilmember Valdivia Alcala, there is not a definition of it contained in this proposed ordinance, but I do know that some of the situations that were described were if an individual was barricaded inside of the home, there may not be an opportunity to actually knock and announce because they may know that law enforcement is present already and they may shoot through the door or the opening of the structure. I'm probably not the best person to talk about the law enforcement aspect, but.
When I asked that, and I should have brought it, so I apologize for that, but there is a legal definition that's to, and 9 times out of 10, it includes direct bodily harm or possible death, which is not how they worded it, so I'm doing a terrible job, and I should, but I mean, it has to be that you are in a situation where you are in imminent harm. So I think that is if somebody, I think one example was if somebody, as you're coming up to the door, kicks out a window, puts a gun in your face, at that point, you're going to take action, and if you forgot to quote-unquote announce it, we'll deal with that later, I guess is how it was put.
So nothing in the term exigent has to do with the perception of harm?
No,
like
no.
it has to be a hardcore.
No, it has to be an actual threat in the moment. Yes,
Mhm.
and that I did clarify.
Okay.
Yeah.
I also wanted to find out what exactly was it when you met with the FOP that was the wording? You said it was it on the body cam specifically, the body cam?
No, some of the language as it relates to, and if Lisa wants, but I mean, as I said to somebody, maybe it was the newspaper when they called, I can't go back in time and change contracts, right? So there was some languages written in the ordinance that was contradictory to language that we agreed to as a body when we signed the contract. And so my goal then was to at least clean that up enough so that this, as I said, my 2 goals were still met. We're still banning them, and there can still be investigations and prosecutions if they're abused under the law. So some of the other internal, the original ordinance had some internal actions that could be taken. but the contract doesn't give us that purview. That would be in contradiction to the contract. So it was that kind of stuff.
Okay, and I also wondered why it had something listed in here, and I'm trying to find it, about the body cam. Can you help me on this? Was this on page 1?
The original bill had a time definition of when they needed to go on and go off. Again, that had some contradictions with what is in the contracts, but I will say that our policy in our department at this time is that those policies are already in place. So that was one that we can discuss for a different day when something else comes up, but since it didn't harm the material of what we were trying to accomplish here, we just decided to address those issues later if we needed to.
So I think it was where, I know I saw it in here somewhere, where the body cam.
Maybe 5 minutes before, 5 minutes after,
Yes,
something
where
to that
it's
point.
supposed to be on anyway, but yet they wanted the body cam language taken out. Was I thinking that right?
Yes, but in their defense, and I will say it wasn't primarily because they were opposed to body cams. All of our officers wear them and use them. It was more, again, trying to get out any contradictions to the contract we have versus so that it was clean, so to speak. Not, I will say their opposition wasn't, we don't want to use body cams.
And in looking at line 48, under complaints, any complaints received alleging that a no-knock warrant was served shall be presented to the chief of police, who shall refer the matter to the professional standards unit for investigation, and such investigation shall be subject to review by the independent police auditor. Again, I think that this is a really good, first approach. I think that I've said in at least 2 meetings that I don't have a lot of confidence in the police auditor, because I believe that the independent police auditor is the police just investigating themselves. And after seeing 2 and 3 months of every report, so we received 2 reports, it'd be 6 months of reports that have so many cases that were brought forth by the public, and no excessive force or no issues were found, even though Chief Cochran did say that there were branch-off issues that were dealt with. And what I believe is the lack of transparency that definitely, in my opinion, exists within the IPA and the whole process. That's why I believe it's vital, and so do a number of constituents, that we get an independent review commission. This kind of makes me cringe when I look at it going to the IPA, because I just don't know what kind of wholeness those who have actually been abused in some fashion by not complying with this may run into. But I guess, with all the work that you've done with it, you feel that you've come to a solid place with this.
If I didn't, I would be bringing forth originally and telling everyone, this is it, and we can either do this or deal with the consequences later. And I would have fought that battle if I thought it needed to be fought. Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
All right, thank you.
City Manager? It seems that, and I'm just asking your opinion because there's been a lot of questions with regards to the use of the unions and the police department. Would it be adequate to have maybe the chief or Matt Blassingame representing the union maybe come up and speak with regards to the conversation? They're your staff, so I'm asking you, sir.
Chief Cochran, please come forward.
Mayor, City Manager, Council, what was the specific question?
I think as the article, as the ordinance has been redrafted, as the article's been redrafted for the ordinance, your opinion about the changes relative to where it still places your department and the actions that it'll follow when executing warrants.
Yeah, I think the changes are very good, and they were hashed out over a lot of conversations and a lot of face-to-face meetings. The thing you got to keep in mind is body-worn camera, there's a policy that covers that. Discipline and corrective action, there's a policy that covers that. And so when you start putting things and meshing and cross-sectioning them, you start getting contradictory. And then you start coming into violations of contract, or if you come into violation of the ordinance. And so at the end of the day, no-knock warrants are banned with this ordinance. And so that's what was set out to be accomplished, I believe. And that can be accomplished. And then the discipline, if it needs to take place, takes place. And then body-worn cameras covered under its policy. And like the Councilman Duncan said, our folks work body-worn cameras. They activate them by policy and all that good stuff. So I think this is a very good ordinance in the aspect that it bans no-knock warrants.
Thank you very much. Additional comments or questions? We have the chief here. Councilman Padilla.
I'd just like to thank Councilman Duncan for his efforts. Thank you, Chief. And I appreciate the conversation following. I know that it has been said that one reason to put this in place is because we may not always have a chief that is as visionary as the current one that we have. Regardless of that, I can't believe that anybody on this council would shy away from bringing this issue up if somebody made a mistake, if somebody violated that. I can't believe that anybody would just stand by and accept behavior that would be unacceptable by the department. So that's a guarantee that I think I could put money on. And I would challenge my council member fellows to keep that in mind, regardless of whether or not we pass this, and I do support it. We have oversight of our Topeka Police Department. Our city manager will work with us. He will talk to the chief of police on our behalf. And if not, we have the ability to go directly to that chief of police. So don't be misled that this is the only stopgap that we'll have in place to make sure our citizens are safe. And with regards to the details in the ordinance, I, at this point, have no reason to believe that there's any attempt to be non-transparent with the independent auditor. There are things in there that will occur. They have occurred. It made it possible for the police department to make adjustments in some of their training issues. That independent auditor is doing much more than just reading through reports. And I think that for a position that's only been in place for 1 year, we've accomplished quite a bit with regards to oversight on how we train our officers. So I wouldn't be in a rush to claim that there has been non-transparency with that position. And I applaud the chief and the city manager for working with that position because it is independent of the police department. The independent auditor does not answer to the chief of police. It's to the city manager. And the city manager works under our direction. So ask the questions that you want. You'll get the answers that they're able to give you with confidentiality. But I'm confident that they are not doing this to placate anybody or to put somebody at arm's length about an investigation. So I just want to make some comments about that. I've heard this a couple of times now with regards to independent auditor, and it's gone unchallenged, and I think it's time that somebody speaks to that. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilman Dolan?
I think Councilman Lesser was just a tad ahead of me, so I'll yield my time to him.
Councilman Lesser?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I too want to thank Spencer for his hard work on this and in bringing it forward, as well as then going back and working through the issues that came up with it. You know, just two things I want to point out as well is I do also want to point out, even in situations where there have been no knock warrants and search warrants, there is also another step that goes in front of that we haven't talked about, is a judge has to approve that. So it's not that, Chief Cochran is sitting in his office and somebody comes in and tells him, hey, I want to go do a no-knock warrant, or I want to go what have you into this house. It's got to go in front of a judge for a judge to sign off and say, yes, judicially, we believe that this is warranted. I think the other thing, that I also want to point out is absolutely, the safety of our constituents, our fellow Topekans, but also our law enforcement officers. And we have heard, tonight even, tragic stories about no-knock warrants that the very articulate young lady read that went, terribly wrong. That being said, a situation roughly 15 time flies, but Bobby Jackson, at all-city running back, was kicked out of a gentleman's establishment that used to be at 37th and Burlingame. Was kicked out, went back, shot the place up, killed 4 or 5 people. I can't remember how many. Was apprehended, between jail and transport to court or back. A door was left open and he escaped. I think he was on the run for 1 or 2 days. Law enforcement got a tip of where he was at, and to make a long story short, entered the dwelling without notice. He was asleep on the couch with a 9mm and several clips right by his side, and officers went home to their families, and Mr. Jackson was safe too. So my point is looking at this in totality. I don't know that there's an all or nothing answer here, and that's why I applaud Spencer in his work on this, and the language in there that Councilwoman Valdivia talks about. What is the definition of exigent circumstances? And that's kind of what we're talking about. And the fact that I think we have to look at this whole thing in totality. Rather than just through the narrow glasses, and I think he's done a good job with this. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala? Oh, Councilman Dobler? Sorry.
Yeah,
I know
thank you.
Sorry, he yielded his time for Councilman Duncan. I'll come back to you, Councilwoman.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I'll make this really, really quick. Applaud Councilman Duncan's work on this. Seems like a no-brainer. We have ordinance for no-knock warrants, which makes a lot of sense. Probably made a lot of sense 5 years ago. Makes even more sense right now. The chief of police is in favor of this, supports this. Issues have been worked through with the union, and appreciate their input. I'm not sure there's much more to talk about. I certainly support this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala, thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Mayor. And whether folks like it or not, there is a little bit more to talk about, because it's not only myself that has some doubts about the IPA and not being as independent as it would like to say it is. You also read that in any number of articles across the country about IPAs. And additionally, there are constituents here tonight and also across the city that do not have faith in this. So I would push right back on this, and I don't have a law enforcement background, obviously, Councilman Badia, but I have been in a number of meetings talking with folks. This isn't me just pulling it out of a hat, and that don't have faith in this, which is why so many people are talking across the city about a citizens review panel. So I would just leave it at that. And again, Spencer, I want to support this. It's just, I have such concerns about if there's a complaint, what wholeness would be given if there were actually, if allegations were actually true, and what kind of wholeness would victims be able to get. I appreciate all the work that you've done, but at this point, I just don't think, I was going to support it, but after hearing more stories and then thinking about all the meetings that I've been going to, I have just, I can't do it, but I thank you for all your work.
Additional comments or questions from the, yes, Councilwoman Hiller.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a technical question that may resolve your issue too. If I may, to Councilman Duncan or to Chief, my understanding is, if I understood correctly, you pulled the body camera section that had been in the first version of this out because it simply repeated what's already in the code. Is that correct? So that we didn't have it in two different places?
Well, we already have policy. All our officers have body cameras. And
Right.
a couple things. I'll reiterate, their issue was not the use of body cameras. I think that's, I know, but I want to make that clear. These officers are very clear that is not their issue. The issue was the language as it was just, some of it was in contradiction to a contract we have with the union. And so instead of opening this up to any issues that could stall this, delay it, not make it possible, while we work through that, the simplest solution was to pull that section out at this time, since it's already policy. And if that's a discussion other people want to have at a different time, great. But that was the simplest solution to get us to, again, my two original points is we ban them, and it can still be investigated and prosecuted once it becomes part of our law.
But my question then, I wanted to confirm that because in this section on complaints that lays out a very specific procedure, is there any difference between the procedure that's here for this particular issue and our standard policy and procedure?
I know that it doesn't contradict anything we have in contract. I mean, I think that answers, I mean, if that's your question.
Well, my point is that when you're writing policy, if possible, you don't duplicate it so that you don't, at a future time, change it in one place and find yourself stuck with a contradictory language someplace else.
And if staff has an answer, but I mean, in talking with both the union and their attorney, this is right in line with what we've already got established with them in policy.
And the reason I'm asking is because if this is the standard procedure anyway, then maybe it doesn't need to be here either. So if the standard procedure right now is that any complaints go to the chief and then go to the standards unit and then go to the IPA and back, then we don't necessarily need to repeat it here. And then if it were changed at some time in the future, added to, decide not to have an IPA or whatever, we don't have this as an outstanding one-off. You see what I'm saying?
Chief, did you have something you want to add? Mayor, Chief Cochran has something to add.
Chief Cochran?
Yeah, on the body-worn camera, the main reason you don't want it in the policy is for the simple fact that technology is changing all the time. And if you codify it in an ordinance, then if something needs to change in policy, then you got to go through the whole procedure to change an ordinance, which is quite cumbersome. Where if it's in policy, you can update policy, you can make it model policy and best practices. And so policy, that body-worn camera policy gets updated quite often, anytime technology comes out and all that. So that's the main reason that it really need to be taken out of it, because if you codify it, then you lock down things, and then if things change, it's hard, you know.
Well, where then is our complaint procedure?
Because complaint procedure is in policy as well. And so that's another reason. The complaint procedure is a policy, the discipline, the corrective action is a policy. It's all covered. It's all there already. And so you codify that in a policy too, codify that in an ordinance. Then if you want to make your complaint process easier and all that other stuff, then you got to go through the changing of an ordinance once again. So the main reason those two things really come out of there is the simple fact that if you codify it in an ordinance, you really hamstring yourselves as a council.
Well, that was my concern, is that if it didn't need to be here because it was already in policy and every complaint is addressed the same way, then with two pieces of that, A, maybe it doesn't need to be here, and B, the language did from the first one to the second one get changed from saying that if a complaint alleging a violation of this article, which then could include the exigent circumstances or anything related to that search warrant, got changed to any complaint received alleging that a no-knock warrant was served. That's a pretty technical word change, but if that would cut out some of this process, it just seemed like, when in doubt, leave it out, I guess.
Well, and I think the important thing here is Councilman Duncan is wanting to codify no-knock ordinance. Basically what he is saying is, I want to make sure going forward, we're not going to do something that we already don't do.
I'm not concerned about that.
And so I think, you know, as we talk about the no-knock warrant, we don't do those anyway. You have to have a judge approval anyway, which judges, I don't know the last time a judge has granted a no-knock warrant, and we don't do them. And so, again, I think what we have here and with everything else in place, we got something potentially very, very good.
My question was only the technical question of whether we need this complaint process in this ordinance, that's all.
Mayor, if I could make a comment.
Absolutely, sir.
What I would say, Councilwoman, is that right now, I don't know that we have specific timelines that are there. And I think really what this is forcing it to happen is that this brings it to the forefront related to this particular type of complaint, that it would need to be completed within 7 days. And so what I think this is doing is forcing this particular item to be a higher priority for review, whereas others, we don't necessarily have a timeline that's established. It's put in, I mean, we like to accomplish them and often do very quickly within the 7 days on even a normal complaint. Ed will complete those in that time frame along with PSU whenever they complete it, and then he gets it, he can complete it within 7 days. So, but I would think what this is doing is establishing this as a priority should it become an issue where a person files a complaint.
Then I have, thank you, that helps, because I just wanted to know why this was different and needed to be in there. If I may ask one more question, and it would be a legal one. So the way this is written, any complaint received alleging that a no-knock warrant was served, if the judges are never ever going to approve a no-knock warrant, then obviously a no-knock warrant would not be served unless there was a workaround with a judge. But if in fact the officers in the circumstances felt that the exigent circumstances were there, then people wouldn't be able to file a complaint with this language?
Councilmember Hiller, I think they could file a complaint in any circumstance and it would go up the chain and be investigated. I don't think this would prohibit it necessarily. On the no-knocks, there's a process for how you obtain warrants. So, you know, the first step is for the detective to fill out the application for the warrant, and you fill out an affidavit saying here's all the reasons why you need it, and then that usually gets reviewed by sergeants and lieutenants and maybe a captain. And then after that, usually the DA's office will take a look at it, and then it goes up to the judge. But as Chief said, very rarely will a judge issue a no-knock warrant, but that doesn't mean that they will never issue a no-knock warrant.
I'll add one thing. Keep in mind, this also sets, God forbid it gets to this point, it also sets a standard in a civil action. So don't just look at the criminal action. It also sets a very specific standard if there's a civil action that's taken by someone who's involved in that you have to do this or else. And so there's a new bar added to that portion of it too.
I just was wondering if there was a situation where the exigent circumstances occurred, and so somebody gave an example earlier where they needed to come in a window, they were being threatened, and they just came on in, and someone would argue that they had failed to announce themselves in some way. If that complaint, because there was no no-knock warrant issued, would not fall under this expedited complaint process.
Councilmember Hiller, I think that they would still be able to file a complaint because it says it relates to Article 4, and that talks about the exigent circumstances. That's all contained in the same article. It will all be processed. We're not going to turn away a complaint that somebody files on that type of technicality.
I'm just
yeah, it
watching the words.
It won't happen.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Additional comments or questions on this item? Further discussion? Okay, at this point in time, if there is no further comments or questions, I don't believe we have a motion. Do we, Councilwoman Nager?
Motion to approve.
We have a motion. We have a second by Councilman Padilla. Additional comments or wrapping up questions? If not, we proceed by voting.
Mayor De La Isla?
Yes.
Actually, this is a council vote.
Yeah, it's a
Sorry,
home
Mayor,
rule
you don't get
ordinance.
to vote. I'm sorry. So
Mayor doesn't vote on this, sorry.
Councilmembers Hiller,
Yes.
Valdivia Aquila,
No.
Ortiz,
Yes.
Emerson,
Yes.
Padilla,
Yes.
Nager,
Yes.
Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
and Lesser.
Yes.
We have 8 yes, Ms. Valdivia Aquila voting no. The motion passes.
Motion passes. At this point in time, we move on to the next item. Item I, as the clerk would read.
I, as a resolution introduced by City Manager Brent Trout, adopting the findings, recommendations, and strategies in the citywide housing market study and strategy analysis.
City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. We had a presentation last week and a healthy discussion related to the items with regards to our housing study that was completed. Obviously, tonight we're here to consider the recommendations and strategies that were presented last week and seek your approval of those in the resolution that's been presented. So we ask your consideration of that resolution.
Before we enter discussion from the body, we do have 3 individuals signed up to speak on this item. The first individual signed up to speak is Mr. Ivan Weicker.
Good evening, Madam Mayor.
Good evening, Ivan.
And City Manager and councilpersons. My name's Ivan Weichert. I am the president of the Topeka Area Building Association and a longtime member of that same association. We consider our association to be constantly in a state of housing study. That is our business, that is the lifeblood of many of our members, and it's very important to us. Building in Topeka is not just, as some would think with those members, the higher-end homes and subdivisions of the city, but we are also very involved, and I myself have personally been involved with Habitat for Humanity for a little over 20 years. So my feeling and my passion for that spans a pretty wide range of investment. I was privileged to be invited to sit on the steering committee for this housing study. And I think over time, and it's been since last fall, that our work on that and the company that provided that effort did very well. They were very thorough in their work. We had a lot of input. Some I have heard lately have felt like they didn't have enough input, but you hired them to do a study, and they have accomplished that, and it's now before you. I was a little surprised that it says to adopt all of their work, to adopt their findings, their strategies. I believe that's your job going forward. I think perhaps you should consider accepting their work and then work on it from there, because the hard part is going forward. And that's your responsibility, to find those strategies and find those things that need to be done and make those things happen. I was also involved in the previous housing study, and that study maybe had a certain weight when it was done, but then after years of dust, it weighed a lot more. And that goes back to, again, your responsibility. Whatever you find in that study that rings true with you, act on it, put it in policy, establish those strategies, and move forward. But I just encourage you to do those things with a good open mind and see the entire breadth of housing for the city. I would caution you, one other thing is just to be inclusive. Community doesn't stop at the city boundary. I hope, and I am a proponent of a combined government for city and counties, if that is even a question to you. Consider that the community goes beyond a boundary line. And when you make those determinations, think about the entire community. And I would answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Weichert, for being here and for being part of this committee.
You're welcome.
And for your long service to this community.
Thank you.
Next person signed up to speak is Nicole First.
Hello, I signed up to speak on this because I listened last week to the things that they were presenting, and I moved to Topeka for a change for my family, a roof over our head, and an opportunity to give my children a better quality of living and a way of living. Since we've lived in Topeka only 3 years, I've resided in over 5 homes in multiple zip codes, not just one. So it's not a area-based issue, it's a Topeka issue. And the housing that is provided to renters is inhumane. I've had peeing walls where when it rains, the walls literally, our water is pouring out of them. Black mold growing in my ceilings. I've had landlords liquid nail the tub in, and they consider this adequate living, and that we need to continue to pay our rent. And I heard about how they were speaking of we as tenants can complain and do things. I've been one to have reached out to code enforcement. I've had bad electricity problems where there's been a fire in my home and the utility department has been allowed to come and remove things that require permits, but permits were never pulled. And I still have high bills on my utility and water. I right now reside in a very great neighborhood, and I have a broken window that's been broken for 5 months almost. And when I've asked the landlord about it, I have to still pay my rent or get a late fee or be evicted. And this is what the city is allowing the landlords to get away with doing. And then I hear on the docket, we're wanting to build better homes for others to move out of so that what they have is now given to us, like we should take the scraps. And I think that the funds should be allocated to go to the communities that need help. You're allowing auctions of renting of homes that should be probably torn down and rebuilt. You're not holding the owners who are getting these homes and the landlords accountable to making sure that when they are revitalizing these homes, they're doing it up to code and standard quality living. It's pathetic that the residents have to endure these things, and then to sit here and hear individuals who are landlords feel that they're doing the best to their tenants when really they're taking advantage of their tenants because they're not willing to even say, I'll give you what I live in. And that's their property that they should be investing, giving quality standard housing to the community all across the board. There should not be a 50% eviction rate going on, and then the reason is the parents or the people who are renting can't pay their bills. That's not the truth. Well, they can't pay their bills is because they're fighting in other ways to make ends meet, to keep the lights on and the water on, when water bills shouldn't be $200 in the household today. And that's not due to increase in water, that's due to poor plumbing. And that was the thing that was on the docket last week, and I didn't get a chance to speak, but we really need to look at all around the board where we are addressing where the money is going and fix situations instead of making a better quality living for someone else, never mind who really needs it, which is the whole community. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. The next person signed up to speak on this item is Nubian Phillips.
I just wanted to speak up on my experiences of living here. And some of the places I've lived in haven't been the best places to be in. I know one home I had mold in it. And when we complained to the landlord and they didn't fix it, we took it to court. And then the court gave them, I think, about like a month or two to fix it. And instead of fixing it right away, they waited till almost their month was up to fix it before they finally got to fixing it. So we had to continue living in a molded home. One time when they had our dryer, we hooked it up finally after waiting months for them to fix the dryer. And then we finally got hooked up, it set fire in the house instead of it working how it's supposed to be. And then they never came back and fixed that as well. And they refused to put us in hotels as well. And just we had to stay there and live with that. With me having asthma, staying in a molded home wasn't good for my health. I would have more breathing problems. And even though we complain and say stuff to get them to fix it, they were still we'll fix it when you get to it, or they'll never do it, and then it's a move out or take it to court. And when you go through the money problems, the issues you have, it's more helpful for us to move out than have to wait to go to court and not work out, and you end up evicted and have no home. We've also have moved, I think I've moved a couple times all over the city and continue to have that problem over and over again, either be mold or a leak in the basement or a fire in the house. And I think what to say. I think at that point, I feel like this is something that should be fixed by now, rather than just continue to move on and on and on, and then just seeing, we'll just hopefully get better, and then never get better, and then the landlords continue to do it no matter where we go. And that's all.
Thank you for speaking to us. Okay, we have heard from our constituents, and now the floor is open for the council members. Councilman Padilla.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to ask quickly of the city manager a couple things. We've all read the study, looked at it. A lot of recommendations, a lot of data in there. Some of it not brand, most of it, a lot of it not new, stuff that we've known for some time. And did I miss in there, is there a recommendation for a master plan, how we would approach these issues that have been addressed in that housing study? And then secondly, second question would be, I know, City Manager, we've talked about the position that you're going to have in your office that would be pretty much like an ombudsman for your office. With these kind of issues that a couple of our speakers have spoken to and the frustrations that they have with them, would that be something that ombudsman's office could handle firsthand right off the bat, so it cuts down maybe some of the red tape and quicker actions can be taken, or answers that they can utilize to better their situation? So it's just a couple of quick questions, and I thank you for your time there.
Thank you. After that response, Councilman Duncan.
So with regards to the master plan, that is steps that staff will be working on going forward as far as developing the steps and action things that we'll accomplish with regards to each of the areas that are identified, and we'll begin to work towards accomplishing the items that are in the housing study. I think Bill has a better idea of how that will all form out, but bottom line is we will begin to work on those steps with the various partners within the community that we need to. As far as the complaints, obviously my office is always willing to take complaints related to issues that citizens are experiencing, and we will relay them to the appropriate persons with regards to the issues that they bring to us. whether it's a department within the city or if it is another partner, we will forward them on to the best place possible in order to get a solution determined, or at least get an answer that even if it is, oh, there's nothing that can be done, at least they'll have an answer related to the steps that were taken as to this is correct, the actions taken are accurate, and so we can give them those answers. So at any time, and that's part of what will happen to a certain degree with the Community Engagement Division coming from Neighborhood Relations into the City Manager's office. I think it will give citizens another opportunity to get closer to being able to get answers to issues that they have more directly.
Mayor, if I may, one follow-up.
Absolutely, Councilman Padilla.
Thank you, Mayor. City Manager, you mentioned the staff will be working on that along with partners. And I can't think of better partners like Ivan Weicker or other people like him in that business for decades. Will that include people like Mr. Weicker and others working along with staff to come with that step-by-step master plan? Thank you, Mayor.
I'll ask Bill to come forward and talk a little more in detail about it. Bill Finder, our planning director, planning and development director.
Thank you. Councilmember Padilla? Yes, the Mr. Weicker representing the home builders, area builders for Topeka, and all the other stakeholders on our steering committee, the sponsors of the study, financially and otherwise, would be part of the solutions going forward. We have a couple higher priorities that we would tack with them, including the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and weatherization. Those are the things that have come to the forefront as a part of this study. So yes, they would be part of that. Absolutely, because if there's one thing that you noticed as came out of the study is it takes a village. The city cannot do this all by, there's no way we have the resources. So we have to depend on partners to do more as a community.
Thank you, Bill.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Yes, Councilman Duncan has been waiting patiently, and then Councilwoman Ortiz.
No, just a couple things. First is I will support adopting this. I think I said last week, there's some things in there that I think certainly need some further discussion, and maybe I'm on board with, maybe I'm not, but as a whole, I think it's important that we adopt this document, and I think the majority of those things that some of us have questions are going to have to come back here anyway, because they are primarily policy decisions that staff's not going to be able to move forward without us taking some votes and being a part of that discussion. So I'm comfortable adopting what has been presented, because I'm concerned otherwise we spend a lot of time going through 150 pages deciding what sentences we want to bring in and what sentences we don't, when at the end of the day we may end up adopting the majority of it anyway. And I think I don't want to get bogged down in the minutia of that personally. And what I also mentioned last week is how I think we can solve that. And so I will make a motion, I guess, this evening that I think we need to create a subcommittee of this council to help look at and move forward on those decisions that will need policy changes that come before this body. Not to get in the way of the things staff can do tomorrow and start actively working on, but the components of this that will take some real policy change. Not part of my motion, as I said last week, is I guess to the deputy mayor who has to make those decisions. I'm not throwing any other council members under the bus. I'm happy to help lead that effort and get it started and participate heavily in that. So I guess that would be my recommendation to the body to help make sure that this moves forward, partly because it's going to take buy-in and some time from us as a council to make these things happen, and also partly it's not a fair burden to place on our entire staff to adopt this thing and then say it's solely your responsibility to make it happen. That's why we were elected. So I'm willing to get in there and participate with them in that process. So thank you.
Councilwoman Ortiz?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I believe the study brings out a lot of good things, a lot of things that we need. I know we were challenged by JUMP several weeks ago to fund this. And I've talked to the city attorney about funding. Because a lot of people think that by adopting this, we will be putting an amount on our funds. And that's not true. So I want to make sure that that's clear, because when I read through my emails and I get the calls and they're telling me to put the money in there, I wish we had the money to put in there. But having said all that, the presentation last week, I really, really like the presenters. And I tell you, I like the challenge from Jump. I have something in my pocket that I'm going to kick it off with, and I'm going to talk to several people. I liked when the presenter said, we don't need to get caught up on the millions. We need to start laying the foundation. And we can do that. All of us can do that. This is where it takes a village. I appreciate Jump for bringing this forward, but it takes all of us. And when I say that, I look at the rescue mission, and when they were going to close, and they needed millions, almost $1 million or however much. And we as a city, we came together and we said, no, we're not going to do that. And from the little kids to the DA's kids cutting grass, and they presented $1,000, to other people, we had somebody in the city manager's office that was selling bracelets. Everybody came together and everybody presented that to the mission so that it can continue to move on. And I think we have that same feel here. I hear everybody say we need affordable housing. I would agree with that. I've lived in some of those houses as well. And it's tough when you have some babies and you don't have the appropriate job, and that that's the only roof over your head. I've talked about with staff about Pine Ridge that it needs to really come down, and some other entities. So I think across the board in Topeka, everybody agrees with that. So I'm not going to get focused on the $3 million that we need. What I'm going to get focused on, let's get started. We have done that. We have a plan, and we have where we can put our money. So we have that. So let's get started, and let's all work together and get the ball rolling and watch the amount go up. We need to start on the foundation right now, and I think we can do that. And with everybody pushing forward, we can do it in no time. But if we sit back and dwell, the city needs to do that. The city needs to find that. We're never going to move anywhere. We're going to continue to take these baby steps. And I'm tired of crawling. I'm ready to start walking. So I challenge my colleagues for that. And when I call on you, because I do have something under my belt, if Mr. Colbert doesn't mess with me, I can get it out in September. And my goal is $25,000 to lay down. And I think I can meet that goal with everybody's help. And that includes you, Madam Mayor. And I know you'll be there to support us. Thank you. So with that, I'm glad to see this. Thank you.
Actually, Councilwoman Ortiz, I love the fact that you have challenged the body, and I think that this is the appropriate time for me to throw out a proposal as well to this governing body. I have been very transparent for several years that I feel that it is paramount for us not only to start this housing trust fund, but to look at it as a tool that self-perpetuates. And I know that this is not a time for us to be looking at what we have in reserves, but I think that if we were to be able to consider a structure of taking from our reserves some funds that we could put in the community foundation and consider using those funds not as using the funds, but as an endowment that would allow us some time to create interest that would be generated from those dollars, that we could reinvest back into it and use a specific percentage to refund, add to the dollars that we are investing, but then a small percentage of that return to be back to utilize into the community. We would have then in turn approximately $3 to $5 million that we could start investing in, that we would not be moving at all, that would still be part of our reserve funding that we would be using to invest into our community. If we were to take a 50% of whatever the investment rate is and reinvest that back into the fund and use another 50% of what the interest is, we would start having dollars to go back into our community. And in addition to that, we could then challenge our community to join us. And as soon as we're able to match those dollars, we bring them back into the city. The intention would never be to use those dollars. The intention would be to use them as an investment that would then serve as leverage in our community. So I love the fact that there is an appetite, and I'm trying to make sure that we can be good stewards of those dollars. And I think that now is the time for bold action. Thank you very much. Additional comments and questions? Councilman Lesser.
Thank you, Mayor. I too appreciate your comments as well, and Sylvia's too. I hope too that we use this as a learning experience. I've said before when this initial briefing came, and I kind of call this study the Captain Obvious study. I hope as we move forward, we have very smart people with Bill, Fiander, and then in the local community as well, that, the best thing in looking at, as I looked through this, was I learned that we didn't pay for the entire study because at $97,000 for the information that we got from this, I sure would like to have donated, had that money go to start the Housing Trust Fund. And I think the conclusions that I reached, from what we got here, we certainly had the resources of people in our community that could have got together, who've been here and came up with similar recommendations than what we have here. And I hope we do now start to move on that here in the city, as well as I'm just using this as another example of something Councilwoman Hiller's talked about, a master fire plan, and I've looked at 3 studies that we paid for that too, that we haven't done anything on, that I don't know what we paid on. So I'm taking the opportunity at this point in time too for us as a council to look at situations when we're going to spend this type of money, of whether we have the resources here in town. Do we have any better real estate developers around than Cody Foster? Do we have any, and Jim Klossman and people such as that? Do we have people anybody who has any more education who knows this area as Bill, who's on our staff? We have all these people here, and let's look forward as we move forward and utilizing those local resources that we have that have been here, that know our community, instead of coming back with something that tells me nothing that I already didn't know before, quite frankly. Thank you.
Councilwoman Hiller, to be followed by Councilwoman Nader.
Thank you, Mayor. This has been some pretty varied discussion, everything from big developers to code issues to getting council members involved to some discomfort and that it's kind of out of the norm to adopt a plan and all of its recommendations, especially one that's 150 pages long or whatever this is. I think it's really exciting to have this on deck. I've been pushing for a housing plan for a long time. What we have in front of us is a market study. We have some really fabulous data, and we have some ideas, but we don't have a plan yet. And I would suggest that already, in this short time that we've had it, and again, it's an exciting study to see, but there are some flaws in the numbers that we've got to debug. There are already some other ideas that have come in via email from citizens, that classic redevelopment strategies that aren't in this plan and that we might want to consider. Not everyone agrees with all the initiatives that are proposed in this plan. They've been discussed before and recently. And there are, for us to move forward, there's some reality checks that we've got to sit down and look at. For instance, the limitation on how much is available in low-income housing tax credits. We've either got to do some advocacy and get more tax credits, or it's sort of a self-governor on how much big development we can do, even though we want to do it. And with that, then, there's just a lot of detail that we need to work out. And also, as Councilman Duncan said, there are a lot of us, maybe 100% of us, that would like to be involved in making sure that the neighborhoods been heard as well, and that we set a plan moving forward that plumbs out of this the strategies and data that we need, but is very specific. And so with that, I would like to propose, rather than an alternate to this resolution, and a motion, I would move that we adopt the study as an invaluable collection of data and strategy options, and request that the city manager work with citizens, staff, providers, and the council to craft a starting implementation plan in 90 days. And I say that because we are all eager to pull this together. We do not have a specific plan with goals of how many units we would need to do in each. And I think 90 days should be, it's intense, but if we want to pull it together and be ready for 2021, get that fundraising started, we need to be clear what we're raising it for instance. And so pulling all that together quickly is important. We are going to talk about the consolidated plan later in this meeting, and it too is a new 5-year plan. There have been lots of discussions up at the CAC level of getting a chance to be better engaged in how the neighborhood dimension works. I think when we get to that, using that same 90-day period to engage people in those goals as well, will end up, they mesh together, and we will be stronger as 2021 approaches to have them both set and ready to go. So that was my motion. Yeah. Okay.
Second to the motion of Ms.
We have a
Hiller.
motion by Councilwoman Hiller, a second. I know that we have Councilwoman Nager waiting and Councilman Duncan waiting as well for comment.
Mayor Lisa would like to make a comment.
I just wanted Councilmember Hiller to get some clarity. Are you amending this resolution, or are you substituting what you just said in place of this?
Yes, that's in place of
So
the
it would be
resolution.
a substitute for what's in here now?
Yes.
I don't know if she got everything in the minutes, so that's the only
Okay.
concern I had. But we
Brandon,
can
do you need it again? Yes.
I think it would be beneficial for the body if you could repeat your whole replacement motion.
Thank you. I'm happy to do that. I move that we adopt the study as an invaluable collection of data and strategy options, and request that the city manager work with citizens, staff, providers, and the council to craft a starting implementation plan in 90 days.
That was the motion made by Councilwoman Hiller and seconded by Councilwoman Valdivia. We have now Councilwoman Nager waiting to do comments, and then after Councilwoman Nager, we have Councilman Duncan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And we also have Councilman Dobler, who's been flying by night. I'm really excited about the fact that we have this data to work with. Yeah, these are issues that, especially if you've been in Topeka for many years, decades, like many of us have, that we've seen these things again and again, and here we have the data to prove it. And as somebody from the scientific community, having data is just the best. It means we can move forward in a concerted effort. I do have a question for the city manager. And then I have, I guess, a friendly amendment. We'll ask the city attorney to Councilwoman Hiller's proposed ordinance or movement or
motion.
Motion, thank you. But city manager, how do you see some of this being implemented with how neighborhood relations specifically has been restructured? Because we've talked about a lot about renters and landlords
and whether that be in apartment buildings or homes, and then also just the fact that we would like to see home ownership up. How will that work now that neighborhood relations has been restructured and is under your direct provision?
Well, with regards to neighborhood relations, a couple of things. The housing division that's now part of the Planning and Development Department. So a lot of the housing issues that we work with CDBG money on is already going to be incorporated in that department. The issues related to if a person has a problem with a rental property that they want someone to look on the inside of, I mean, they would still go to the Property Maintenance Division and file that. They're co-located now, so it's still not going to be a problem as far as proximity. How you get a hold of them is still the same. There really are no hindrances of them to be able to make those kinds of requests related to pursuing a problem that they might have with a landlord, allowing people to come and do the investigation, submitting a complaint. Those types of things will still continue to be done. As far as implementation related to what is being proposed by Councilwoman Hiller, just briefly talking with Director Finder, it would probably be one of those things where we would ask those individuals that have been on the steering committee in those various sectors of the community that they would continue on to help with the implementation phase, developing that implementation plan. They already represent the various sectors of the city that we would want to have involved, and so we would simply see if they were willing to carry on, because otherwise it could potentially take 30 days to even figure out who's going to be on the committee, which would give us 60 days for an implementation. I think that's our only opportunity to try and get that done in 90 days would be if they're willing to continue on. Did that answer your questions?
It did. And then I guess what I would propose to Councilwoman Hiller is kind of drawing from Councilman Duncan's idea of having a council-led committee. Maybe that could be something that the council could also, if we create a subcommittee, could work on during that 90-day window and help support those kind of those directives to make sure that we are acting upon this data and in a productive way and in such a way that we're representing our constituents as well as having our representatives from the different entities throughout town. So that is what I have.
Mayor, do you want me to respond?
Yes, absolutely.
I don't see them as mutually exclusive. I very intentionally put the council in that string of identified participants in doing that plan. And so it could be any or all of us if that's how it's set up, or it would not exclude having a committee. I could see it going either way. I think a lot of us care a lot about it and are eager to hear a little more from our constituents as well as from the committee, which has served so well, and the staff, who's, I think Bill's been involved in this up until now, not just jumping into it new. So we've got, I really want it was intentional to put all four of those groups in because I think we all care a lot about it and want to have some participation in the plan. So if you feel still that there needs to be either a second motion to create a council committee or if there's a way to include that in here, I see it working either way.
I would be curious to hear what Councilman Duncan's take on that is since he proposed the committee, if that's how he goes on it.
I think it will work great in the sense that he's next with the comments. So, and then after Councilman Duncan, then we have Councilman Dobler. Forgive me, please, for not having seen you moving your hand.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Well, I guess part of my answer is I need a clarification. What is the expectation that we're getting back in 90 days? Is it that we're getting just an action plan on how to then move forward on putting these into place as we go through a 4, 5, 7-year plan, or is it more comprehensive than that? In 90 days, the expectation is we're going to know what we're doing to implement these? Because those are two very different.
That is a really good question. My thought was that at least it be a one-year action plan with goals. My preference would be that it's a 3-year plan, but at least a one-year plan. And it would, I think, once you step out of this, which is sort of very oriented toward development and investment, of raising new money and investment of new money, but as we heard earlier, some of the issues are code compliance, which theoretically which should be part of this process and doesn't require anybody else's money because that private owner should be paying for it. And so that is private dollars that have not been active in our community as well. So thank you for asking about that, but I would see a one-year action plan that literally says we're going to bring this many units online in this way, which could include code, could include new construction, could include weatherization, that's an add-on, but obviously getting the trust fund going and weatherization are the two that seem to be universally appealing out of all the recommendations. But by having a one-year plan, or again, a 3-year plan if people think they can handle it, that's going to be plucking out those sectors and those strategies that are either within this study or come otherwise to fold in.
And the reason I ask that is if the expectation is that in 90 days we're looking at an action plan with some direction, if we can accomplish this in a year, this is part of the 3-year plan,
Yeah.
then I'm comfortable over the next 90 days advocating for a subcommittee that as part of that action plan to help move those processes along and assist staff, and also making sure we've provided enough time and input from the community when we look at some of these longer term things like landlord licensing or how we're going to create, if we want land trusts or those things, because those are obviously not going to be resolved in 90 days. So that's why I asked. I mean, we may have a timeline for when we want those resolved as part of that action plan, but I don't feel in 90 days we're going to be able to come back and say, okay, we have all the policy laid out for how landlord licensing would look like or what a land bank would look like. So that's my point is, but if we're looking for directive of that group to come back and say, this is how we get there, this is our timeline, then I can advocate for that over the next 90 days as being part of that process to kick it in gear from that point.
I mean, I had actually played with it and visited with city manager a little bit about it, but it was like, those were things that I would have pulled out, but not necessarily what everybody else would. And it would, when you're doing planning like that, at least in my experience, is, there might be some concrete things that people say, we can actually do this in the first year. But there might be a choice to explore, if we're going to activate and raise X amount of money for the for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, let's say. Boom, yeah, we would get this going, and it's going to be for this and that and the other thing, because you do need to be able to say what you're raising the money for, usually when you're fundraising, to get it in. So maybe that's what happens with the trust fund. Maybe there's a goal for so many new construction units with subsidy from X or Y. We're not going to have that real fast, but there could be a short-term goal of this many units through code compliance that most of them are already affordable, they just need to be to code, and then you've got units that were not safe and affordable that are. Maybe there would be discussion about, well, do we want to do landlord licensing or not, and it's in the long-term trajectory here. Maybe people don't even want to deal with that. If people want to talk about land transfers, there's a proposal here for Housing Trust Fund, but we've really toyed around with how to best get properties moving. Maybe that's a study issue for 2021, and a task force works on that, or staff works on that.
Well, I guess that's why then I go back to my original point. If we're going to adopt this whole piece, and I understand you prefer not to, so I get that. So, but then I go back to, we have to have a mechanism in place that then lets us look at the whole piece. And my only concern with that plan is, if 90 days from now, they come back with, we can accomplish this now, we're going to start moving forward on these 4 things, and we do those 4 things and we've left 6 other things on the table because we didn't have a mechanism in place or anybody assisting staff or moving forward with those other, to see if they're viable. I don't know if landlord licensing is viable, but if we're going to take a look at it, we need a group of folks to sit down with all the stakeholders in the city and take a look at it. Same with the land grant. We need somebody to then be able to come back to the body. That's a combination, I believe, of council members and staff to say, we've looked at it, we've had meetings with everybody in this community. We don't like that idea, but we have this one. And that's my only concern is I don't want that action plan to come back and then we say, great, and we'll get to those other things later. Because I think I said last week, that's what happens with a lot of these studies. So that's my only concern. Again, that's why I go back to what's our expectation in 90 days. If we're going to lay out a timeline with some action steps, great. And then 90 days from now, I will ask this council to create a subcommittee that can go look at all those things that got left off the action plan, and we can go from there. So I guess back to Councilwoman Snager's question, that would be my thought on that, if that's a viable alternative. That's why I wanted clarification on what we expect in 90 days. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Dobler.
Oh, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll be fairly quick here. As we talk about funding, it strikes me that in the innate wisdom of Congress to bypass cities of our size with the funding, it seems like every time I turn around, there's another article about funding that the state's getting, funding that the county's getting. Is there a better place to put some I call it COVID money than a trust fund or towards some of these housing initiatives? I think the county needs to be part of this. Last time I looked, even though I'm in the city limits, I also pay county taxes. I think we're all in the county. It's tough when you're talking about housing issues, it's tough to draw the line at the city limits. It extends outside the city. I think we ought to draw the county in both from a funding perspective as well as an overall holistic, I guess, perspective of housing in this community. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilman Dobler. And I appreciate the fact that while we were talking about the CARES Act, I was forwarding the council the emails to Advocate in DC. And when we were looking at HEROES, and HEROES had a potential of giving municipalities a significant amount of money, just yesterday, the Senate removed dollars coming to municipalities yet again. And there were billions of dollars that are being considered for states. And just so that you all know, just yesterday I reached out not only to have a conversation with the county, I spoke with the city manager, but also conversations with the state with regards to, is this a worthy way for us to receive funding from the federal government, because we continue talking about doing work for housing and we keep expending it in Band-Aid problems rather than us starting to develop a bank of dollars that we could actually use and perpetuate in our community. And there was a positive response in the sense that, yes, that sounded like a great idea. However, there is no allocation right now from the federal government that would allow us to make use of these funds in this fashion. So it seems like we're all thinking the same things. We all have a bias for action on this item. This is going to be something that we will continue discussing. But we do need to do something about it because we've been talking about this housing trust fund for years now. So we have a motion and we have a second. Some amendments from Councilwoman Hiller, and pretty much her motion in summary states that we would adopt this document, but in conjunction to the adoption of this document would include, similar to what Councilman Duncan would want, which is the development of a committee that would not only include council members, but also the community to come up with within 90 days, with a timeline of the things that we would tackle first, so that we can start moving forward with this plan. Councilwoman Hiller, did I summarize this adequately?
I think so.
All right. So what we have in front of us is this motion.
Mayor. City manager wants to speak.
City manager, yes.
Thank you, Mayor.
Kind of important.
Well, the issue that I wanted to bring up was something that Councilman Duncan talked about. If this group of folks come up with 4 particular issues that they feel need to be addressed now, and there are 6 other recommendations that are sitting on the table, I think one of the things you need to remember is that as staff, we look at opportunities that come about. So if somebody came to us with an idea related to one of the other ideas that were touted within the study, we will take a look at pursuing that. It's not an all or nothing type of thing. We continue to keep our eye on the ball of all of the issues that were brought forward in the study for opportunities that exist. It may be the priority, may be those first four, but we're also still looking for positioning ourselves to be able to accomplish those other types of things. So, you know, the concern that we won't focus on the others or not do any of those steps, we will be looking at those and where we can. So just let you know that we won't ignore that.
Can I just clarify something?
Absolutely, Councilman
My
Duncan.
concern is not that staff will overlook it purposefully. My concern is that staff needs help from the people who are elected to get those done. And I just want to make sure that we're taking ownership of something that we're adopting and supporting. I'm not big at giving directives to staff and then saying, get it done or else, without helping you and all of them. And that's the purpose of my comments, was to say, you're doing other things every day. And so that was, I just want to clarify, that's my concern, is that you need support from us on something as large and as big as this.
Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala.
Thank you, Mayor. I would just, last week I told Spencer, I think it was last week, yeah, I'm down for helping in whatever way. I told Karen that earlier. I'll dig as deep as I need to dig to help staff in any way with this. Thank you.
Okay. Deputy Mayor Emerson, it seems like you're going to have a lot of committees to staff.
Oh, yeah, I already got them picked out, so be nice to me.
Councilwoman Hiller, any closing remarks?
Yeah, along the lines of the council members being eager to work on this, I think another, for those who have chimed in on it, with the changes that have been proposed and COVID sort of breaking up meetings, there's been a lot of stir amongst the neighborhood associations and the CAC about whether they've been really genuinely engaged and have been comfortable with that. And so particularly those of us that represent them have been ready to just get together and meet with them ourselves if that's what it takes to make sure that they're engaged. And so that's one of the reasons why, you know, if the staff can put together a structure so we can all be there, it may take some chewing some things out, but I want us to be involved because we all want to be. But I want to make sure we've been able to genuinely engage those people from the community. And I'm looking at Ms. Purse here, not just people that are already actively involved with the neighborhoods, but people who care about this, who'd like to chime in and maybe get engaged. So, thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Councilwoman Hiller made the motion with an amendment, and Councilman Lesser, yes.
Can we read it one more time, what the actual reading is? And then I may have a question.
I don't know that we actually amended it, but if we did, somebody will have to chime in and fix it. I felt like we could still create a subcommittee or a formal committee from the council within what I've said. So let me read it one more time, and then if it needs an amendment, please do it. I moved to adopt the study as an invaluable collection of data and strategy options, and request that the city manager work with citizens, staff, providers, and the council to draft a starting implementation plan in 90 days.
Okay, then the only question I have is probably a combined question for city manager as well as for Bill. Is under the current circumstances that we're under right now, is it reasonable? We're doing budget, we got COVID, is 90 days a reasonable expectation? I ask that for two reasons. Number one, I don't want something rushed that we get just because we have to do it in 90 days. And I don't believe in setting goals that aren't attainable the day that you set them. So my question is 90 days too aggressive? And I'll just see what you guys have to say about that.
Bill? I think Bill's the right person to better answer that, because obviously him and his folks are probably the ones that will be working through this. So, I mean, I have my concerns that the depth might not be there with regards to being able to do that, but I know the issues are more understandable by Bill with regards to who he has basically on call with the steering committee that he used, and what it's going to take for others that we were talking about getting engaged in their availability. So, Bill?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. I guess I would answer by saying, the whole point of the study was to do more. And so if we take our existing programs and workload that we're currently doing and then add more on top of that, I think for us, if you had to ask me, we would be focusing on, staff would be focusing on one or two very important things over the next 120 days to get going. Because that's just what we can do. That's what we can handle, and that's what we can make a commitment to. And I've mentioned those. We need to capitalize the Housing Trust Fund. We're not going to do any units until we do that. So that is to engage the community back and try and do that. That's our momentum. The work on the weatherization is an early win, and we can do that. That's a really good value and bang for our buck. So that's about what we can do. We can continue convening, and we welcome that direction, that support. But we can continue to convene the committees and be more inclusive. But I know, and you know, practically speaking, putting all of that together with everything else in this time that we're in and try and do it the best we can is a challenge. There's no doubt. So I think we work better with, from a staff perspective of helping to convene and then working on those top two priorities, in my opinion. If there are others that either the subcommittee or the stakeholder committee want to emphasize over those in the next 120 days, I think that would be worth knowing, because that's what staff would work on.
So I'm going to put you back on the spot, Bill. Is 90 days aggressive to have that? Would you rather say 120 days? I mean, also know you're dealing with basically a combining of the neighborhood relations and having to deal with that, and then our budget cuts has cost staff people as well. I just want us to be rational about what we're asking of you is all I'm wanting.
I appreciate that. I think getting back engaged with, for instance, the Community Foundation and pulling our sponsors and going out and having the city seed this fund and going back out and looking for partners to leverage into that fund. I think that's what we were expecting to do here in the next 120 days. I think weatherization was a program we wanted to kickstart and expand on what this community does, and we want to do it right. So I think that can be done in the next 120 days, assuming you approve funding or that direction. Beyond that, I think we can put together a strategy or a plan beyond those 120 days, actually. But I think that's 120 days to me sounds like something more practical from staff standpoint, at least, and maybe even the community for that matter. I don't know that.
Councilwoman Hiller, understanding that this is the request from staff, would you be willing to amend that motion to reflect 6 months rather than 90 days, 120 days?
He was talking 120 days, right?
Yes.
Correct, that's what
I'll
that's
tell
why
you-
I'm saying that if staff is telling you that 120 days would seem more feasible, would you be willing to amend your motion?
If I can respond first and see, I mean, this is the first year out, so if the plan doesn't have to have 15 active moving parts the first year, and so if the first year was we want to activate the Housing Trust Fund, and we want to get weatherization going, and we want to and then have study groups that are doing 2 other things, that could be what the plan is. I thought through that timeline a little bit, and what I realized is that 90 days from today would be the 21st of October. If there was anything that needed to be approved by the council before the end of the year, so that we were all ready to go with our agreed plan, both for the consolidated plan as well as for the you've got staff time that you've got to commit to things, and if we need staff time to do this new stuff that was previously doing something else, that's got to be worked out too from a management point of view. So even though 90 days seemed really fast, again, we don't have to overdo this first year, but that way there was time if there needed to be governing body action, there's still November and December to get the voting done and finish it.
If I may, Your Honor.
Yes, sir.
So maybe coming back, maybe not with a absolute hard 90-day finish, but with a report out
Exactly.
of, okay, we've gathered everybody, and even if we want to come to that subcommittee and say, hey, here's what we have realized over the last 90 days, that we can, and here's where we're at, and here's what we think we can do in the next 12 months, even.
Exactly.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor.
All right.
About 100 days.
So for clarification, because I think that we're in a challenging position in the sense that you're requesting 90 days. Our staff is telling us that they need 120 days, not only because of COVID, but also everything else that we have going on, budgeting. But you in 90 days would still want to have something. Bill, am I correct in your understanding?
I think
that
you can't see
you
us.
would- I just want to make sure that I reiterate this, because I think that this is going to be important for us as we make our vote.
Thank you. I think what I was saying was we could envision reporting out in 90 days. Maybe not with a complete plan, but a outline or a status, if you will, of where we think we can go. So I think that will give us enough time to have turned over some stones, put some thought into this, even made some progress, hopefully, on some of those top 2 things. And look ahead to the next 12 months even and say, okay, while we're doing that, we could be, investigating and exploring the next couple things on that list. And here's the partners that are going to help us do that. That's.
There you go.
Yeah, I guess the way I look at it from the way Bill's talking, I look at it as us determining what our first tier priorities are, our second tier priorities, and maybe even our third tier priorities that we're determining. It will probably stick out like a neon light what our first tier priorities are, and we can come forward with that. But to go all the way down the list and determining which way we're going to go, 90 days is not practical.
No, but we don't need to.
But I think doing it in that format, we get the first tier done in the 90 days, and then know that that's the direction that we're moving, and then continue to have meetings to establish the rest of the process that we want to follow and priority-wise. I think that does make more sense.
Councilman Lesser?
Here's what I heard. What I heard is Bill, unfortunately, being in a position where he has to try to make everybody happy. What I heard him say is he needs 120 days. I don't know what the protocol is, because we've been talking about this for a while, but I would request that the 90 days be changed to 120 days. That's what I heard he said he needed.
And again, this is why I asked the councilwoman if she would consider an amendment to that motion to change it to 120. Councilwoman Hiller?
I would consider it, but I thought that Mr. Fyander came around and said the 90 days would be fine as long as it was a report out.
Yeah, maybe within 120 days, we can come back with a report, and with a report out. It could be less than that, but we may need the 120 days. I would.
If you want that.
Yep.
I mean, that gets us to Thanksgiving. And
Yes.
we're talking about a program that's going to start on the 1st of January. So,
Comfortable with that?
well, I'm comfortable, if the, so the 120 and.
Yeah, within 120 days, we'll report to a subcommittee or council,
Council.
however you want, yeah.
Okay, a friendly amendment to 120, if that's what we need, that's fine.
Okay, Councilwoman Valdivia Alca, do you continue to retain your second?
Second.
Okay, so at this point in time, we have a motion, we have a second, and the committees will be formed, and they have 120 days to report out. And the expectation is that the beginning of these plans will be in January of 2021. At this point in time, I think that we are ready to proceed with the voting.
Mayor De La Isla,
Yes.
Council Members Hiller,
Yes.
Valdivia Alcala,
Yes.
Ortiz,
Yes.
Emerson,
Yes.
Padilla,
Yes.
Nager,
Yes.
Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
and Lesser.
Yes.
We have 10 yes, motion passes.
And having voted yes, the motion passes. It is 8:33, so I know that this is a typical time in which we take a 10-minute break. We will have a 10-minute recess before we enter into the non-action items. The meeting will reconvene after 8:43. Thank you.